Hi, Pat the podcast editor here. This week, Dan and Lloyd are talking about the importance of storytelling in your marketing. Everybody's got a story, and a good one can really reinforce the credibility of your work and the way it's perceived. But sometimes it's hard to know where to start.
We're telling the story of projects we've worked on, and we set it out like a story.
Yeah.
So that then people are like, oh, they can do that thing. Oh, I'm really considering working with them. So I think that's the first step.
Now, there are a lot of people out there doing interesting things, but it doesn't always occur to them to let the world know.
All of that storytelling helps build trust, helps build credibility. One of the biggest mistakes I see businesses making is they never talk about any of the work they do.
So we know that people like a good story. But what if my life isn't that interesting? Surely I can just make anything up for people on the internet.
Telling made up, ridiculous stories is worse than not storytelling, I think. You know, when you hear about, I walked past a man and a dog and he didn't
have any clothes or anything.
Yeah.
And
I interviewed him and gave him a job.
Yeah, just hired him as the CEO of my business.
Well, while I've got you, if at any point you're enjoying the show and you want to give a little something back, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. You can subscribe, you can show a friend. It really goes a long way to helping us bring this show to more people. Thank you. Right, are you sitting comfortably? Then we'll begin. This is episode 49 of the Business Anchors podcast.
We're just a couple of business anchors. Welcome to the Business Anchors podcast. This jingle is slightly too long. This jingle is slightly too long.
Is storytelling a wanky marketing term, or is it something that's actually useful for businesses, Lloyd?
I used to think storytelling in general was just a bit of a wanky thing. But now I realise it's really important in business, even outside of marketing and our video stuff we do and everything. It's really important in my eyes.
Yeah.
What do
Why?
you think? What do you think, Dan?
I'll tell you. I honestly
I'll tell you the why.
I agree with you, and the first time I realised storytelling actually works was to do with speaking on stage at events. Because when I started out speaking to small audiences, and I was peeing my pants, sweating, and I was rubbish and hated it. When you looked in the audience, there's kind of different levels of people showing, paying attention. So there's the people who actively, they're really not interested and they just will look at their phone and don't even try and look at you. Then there's the people who kind of pretend to look at you or not. And when I started speaking, most people were in that bucket of not paying attention. And then one time I remember reading, were you going to say something?
No, that must have been depressing.
Well, I think at the time I was so nervous that I didn't really care if they liked it or not. It was just more, I need to do this.
Yeah.
And then eventually...
Before I get completely dehydrated from the sweating and pissing my pants.
And the sweaty palms. And But eventually when I actually...
Week, arms are heavy.
Yes, Lloyd, thanks. Eventually...
Vomit on my sweater already.
Yeah, thanks, Lloyd.
That's all right.
Eventually, when I realised and I got better and I read... Ted's Guide to Public Speaking and learned more about speaking, I learned that it's important to tell stories on stage, and started to realise that when I didn't just share information and I actually told a story, people sort of started to listen. And I was like, oh, this whole storytelling thing actually works a bit.
I noticed a major switch, like with your public speaking and speaking on stage and stuff. It was like that. Like you could be delivering some really value-adding, like useful stuff for the audience, but they weren't always overly engaged. Like half of them, like you said, were kind of like, oh yeah, interesting. Half of them were just like, nah.
Yeah.
Even though it was really good stuff. Whereas I think I remember an event in Lithuania, you were speaking, I can't remember what it was called.
Supernova?
Yes, Supernova.
Hey. That was a wicked event, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. I remember you starting with some kind of story, and I remember looking at the crowd because I was shooting some footage of their reactions and stuff. And you could see everyone just like smiling and like nodding and looking interested. And I thought it's a great way, especially at the start of something, to get people...
It draws people in,
yeah,
doesn't it?
And even though the story you were telling was less relevant and useful to them than the like
practical information
stuff, they were got far more engaged, which was interesting. I've got a bit of a story about storytelling.
Go on.
So I went through a stage at university in between the vodka and Dominoes, because that took up a lot
A
of
lot
my
of your time, yeah.
But where I was actually motivated and punch the mic. Oh, we haven't had that in a couple of episodes.
Whee!
Punch the mic. I was actually quite motivated to learn, and I was thinking like, oh, I want to do good things in my life. Didn't really know what.
Yeah.
But I got to this thing where I was like, if I'm weirdly outside of that 80%, I was like, I've got to use my time productively. And I basically stopped watching TV and films. I stopped like reading books. I stopped anything like that because I kind of thought those things were pointless and didn't add value to my life. So I started just watching documentaries.
Ooh,
I started
what did you
watching
watch?
YouTube videos to learn. And I started reading non-fiction books. I was like, this is productive. Whereas I thought taking in these stories, like watching films, stuff like that,
Isn't
I
useful.
saw as like a waste of people's time. And if I'm honest, I used to like, I was like, oh, they're just watching films. I'm so much better. I'm learning stuff. And I actually remember a time about 3 or 4 years, no, not 3 or 4, probably 2, 3 years into our business, when I realised how important storytelling was in life and in business. I remember calling my friend Paul, because he did script writing at uni, and he basically watched like 3 films a day and never sleeps.
Yeah.
I called him and I was like, I've just realised, you always used to talk about films, and I used to be not interested and be like, why are you spending so much time on films and stuff?
Loser.
And I was like, now I'm so into it. I've realised like storytelling is such a skill and that it's such an art, and in all walks of life, it's really important.
Yeah.
And I'm now getting much more back into stories and like consuming stories and telling my own stories. And that was like a massive turning point, I remember, in my life.
Yeah.
That was a story.
It's
How
weird.
did I do?
Very good.
Cool, thanks.
The end. It's weird how people can tell you stuff, like even at school when people tell you these kinds of things, like stories, you should be, watching stories and using stories until you get into a situation where you realise, because you do it yourself, that it works. Like my speaking thing.
Yeah.
It's weird that you need to actually do it. Like I realised as well with copywriting, with the copy of the posts I do for my kind of personal brand on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I always used to share very practical, here's 3 things you can learn about marketing. 1, good thing. 2.
Right, good thing. Oh, we haven't had the radio voice in a while, have we?
No, please continue.
Yeah. Step 1. Yeah, carry on.
So that was, and then when I moved from just sharing practical 1, 2, 3, and actually started to tell stories like, oh, last week in our business something crazily bad happened, and this is what it taught me, and that kind of thing.
I'm going to tell you a story about how I discovered 3 steps.
Not quite.
No, better story than that. Okay.
But also, I think there is a lot of kind of douchebaggy stories on LinkedIn where people just make up stuff. Telling made up ridiculous stories is worse than not storytelling, I think. When you hear about, I walked past a man and a dog and he didn't have any...
He didn't have any clothes or anything.
Yeah.
And
I interviewed him and gave him a job.
Yeah, I've just hired him as the CEO of my business. It's like, no, you haven't.
Yeah, but they get thousands of views on LinkedIn, which is mental.
Yeah. I suppose that shows the power of storytelling, though. Even if you're making shit up and you're being a douchebag, if you tell a good story, it draws people in.
Yeah. But I think there's... I hate the word authentic again, but authentic storytelling is really important. Like recently, I've started playing around with TikTok for myself, just in my spare time.
Basically a TikToker.
And
Hashtag influencer.
Last week I created a video of... Recently we ran a really exciting contract, and one of our team captured a moment of me on the phone winning it, and then us like celebrating and hugging. And he captured that, and then I created a video on TikTok, shared it on LinkedIn, and it was a really good storytelling piece of content.
So much going on there. With such marketers. Created on TikTok, shared it on LinkedIn.
No, we shared it on LinkedIn because we've got a bigger audience there, and it got like 20,000 views, hundreds of comments and stuff, and it captured that authentic storytelling. Like we didn't plan that, but we're just capturing things that are going on behind the scenes.
And I think the reason that did so well, so that in itself was a story where like you were on the phone and there's like the suspense of, it's like in reality in that video it's like a second, but you're thinking, oh, what's happening?
Yeah.
And then you start jumping around, you tell us, there's not even any audio, but
it's
you
got
can see
music
it visually. And then you tell us whatever it is, and then I look happy, and then at the end...
And you had a tash.
And I had a tash, which really adds to the story. And then at the end, we hug and embrace, and it's like, oh, emotion. And it's that raw emotion with with that really, I think, has made it very engaging with people. And that is the job as marketers, storytellers, content creators. It's triggering that emotion, but obviously most of the time it's not just capturing, this is a real thing that's happening.
Yeah.
You're trying to create that emotion triggering stuff, which is the challenge.
And I think that video alone really reinforced the importance of not just producing highly produced content, but also like that took me, I think, about 10 minutes to make, and it got as more views and engagements than some of the other content that we produce that's highly produced. So yeah, it's
Do you know why I think in marketing and business people are failing with storytelling?
why?
I think a lot of the storytelling we need to do now online as marketers or in business is very short form. So we've got platforms that short form content is the best thing to do on there to get attention and stuff. And I think people think, oh, that's just a short video. I can't tell a story in a short video. Like, oh, that's just an Instagram story. It's literally got story in what it is.
Names the
But
title.
people think, oh no, I can't tell a story because that's just a short thing.
Yeah.
And I just think
You
that's
can.
like you can. I think this was like something I did at school. But 2 sentences can be a story. So it's basically like, oh, I always knew I was creative, but it's only since I've had this job that I really feel I can pursue my passion and creativity. So it's like, the one thing, I knew I was creative, but I couldn't do
Yeah.
anything. And then I can.
Yeah.
Something's changed. And there's that difference in emotion. And so
I think it's more difficult than you think, though, just to tell a story. Like, but I think one of the easiest places to start, if someone's listening to this thinking, I don't really tell many stories in my marketing. How can I sort of add that in? I think one of the easiest things to start with is using the platforms that you mentioned, like Instagram stories, like Facebook stories, Snapchat, because you can very easily create behind the scenes short snippets showing the story of what goes on within your business.
yeah.
And we've started doing that more.
Yeah, I guess people sometimes describe it as building like that brand story, the story behind your brand, and seeing these. And stories can be told at different lengths and over different periods of time. So on Instagram stories or somewhere like TikTok or Instagram Reels or wherever you're doing this, it can be episodic. So, long word that doesn't really add anything. So you can be telling the story of your brand and your business over time. You can be posting one story a day, but actually over time people will get your brand and what you're up to and the story of how your business is developing. It doesn't have to be, we've got to put this loads of time into this piece of content that we're putting out once a week or once a month or this big project. It can be little things over time that tell a story over the long term. And I think that's something we've done quite well with our business, as well as the content that we put lots of effort in for this one thing. You're very good at this, telling this, we're doing this behind the scenes.
Yeah.
We've hired this new person.
Yeah.
We're planting these trees. And it's telling the story of our business.
In terms of mapping that storytelling to actually tangible results, all of that storytelling helps build trust, helps build credibility. One of the biggest mistakes I see businesses making is they never talk about any of the work they do. Like there's some businesses doing some amazing work and they just never talk about it. And a big part of marketing is about perception, how people perceive you. And there's lots of people who are doing this the wrong way and building a big perception of them doing lots of great stuff when really it's kind of false and it's manufactured. But there's lots of businesses who are doing good work, and they're not talking about it more. So
I get frustrated when I see that. And the people I've met, and I've heard about the great work they do, and I really like them. And then I see online, I'm
there's
like,
nothing.
why aren't they?
Yeah.
Why aren't they putting?
But
this out
that's the stuff that and even it's all these little kind of touch points when we meet people and they say, "Oh, I saw that you've hired again. I saw that your office is growing," and it's all these things that people are seeing that are building that credibility. I think a lot of people think, "Oh, no one cares about us hiring people or building a team or building out our office. No one cares about any of that." But they do, in the sense that it helps build trust, build credibility. So if you're not sharing that behind the scenes look into your business and how you're growing and developing, then it's going to make it more difficult to build trust and get customers.
Also, with elements where people are like, oh, that's not interesting enough to talk about. I mean, we use in our marketing and our creative strategy, sometimes we tell stories that aren't about the business or the thing we want to communicate, and then we link the point, so we get the attention with the story. So, for example, we spoke about this a couple of episodes ago, I think, in the Atomic and Hotmart video where we had that guy rugby tackle me.
Yeah.
The story was like, oh, he's angry. He hears this thing going on, and he goes and takes me out and takes me out of the situation. And then, so once we've got the viewer engaged, got the attention,
Then you can
then
tell
he
something more
says,
practical.
Atomic and Hotmart aren't going to have these rubbish speakers. We're going to have good ones.
Yeah.
So that sentence isn't interesting, but we've got the attention with that story, and then we deliver the
Yeah.
point. And you can do that. Obviously, you don't have to have people rugby tackling, but it's that strategy of, you can either tell an interesting story about what you're trying to communicate, or you can tell an interesting story and then go, oh, by the way, now you're here, this thing I'm communicating.
So trying to get a bit practical and a bit people, so people can listen and think, right, I'm actually going to start doing this thing to help introduce storytelling into our marketing. What kind of things can people do? Like, where do you start?
Well, I think...
And what makes a good story? Like, what's in a good story? Tell me a story.
I feel like I'm Boris Johnson there, because, you know, when he gets asked multiple questions, he goes, well, there's a few questions there. Firstly, the first question you said, how can people get started?
Yeah. Good work. Don't go to work.
Was that a good impression?
Yeah, very good.
First thing, we talk about a lot, the marketing funnel, traditional marketing funnel. It's very simple in the world of business, but it really makes sense. We have awareness, getting people's attention, consideration,
Building
making them
trust.
think, oh, shall I work with them? Do I trust them? And then purchase, or other things people call them, which is basically like making it easy for them to buy from you. And we tell stories throughout these 3 levels. You talk about this a lot, don't you, Dan?
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing to think about. So if you're at point 0 of, oh, I was saying about telling stories, where do I start?
That's a good starting point, that framework.
Splitting them up like that. So awareness. What stories can we tell and things to just get attention first, get people to be aware of our business or what we're doing. And then beyond that, right, what stories can I tell? So we, for example, we do case study videos. We're telling the story of projects we've worked on, and we set it out like a story.
Yeah.
So that then people are like, oh, they can do that thing. Oh, I'm really considering working with them. So I think that's the first step. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I also think, and even I was thinking this, when someone says telling stories, I think a lot of people would perceive that as you sit down in front of camera and you open a book and tell a story. Once upon a time, there was a business. But really, as we've said before, there's like micro pieces of content just showing snippets on Instagram stories, or, having a photo of you and your team on your day outing and putting a bit of copy behind what you're doing and why you're doing it. These are all stories. It's not like you in front of the camera reading a book. It's understanding that, yeah, everything can be a story.
Yeah, I think that's the first step. And obviously, you can take this to so many levels. And we have the team here. We've built up a team that are great at storytelling and have their technical skills as well. So there's huge steps, but I think that's a good starting point. Jinx.
We're basically brothers.
Oh, yeah, we are.
Yeah. What other things do you think people can do? Or what other parts of a story should people be thinking about?
Well, I think thinking about your second question, second part of the question.
Yeah.
Like what elements make a good story and how to think about that sort of thing. I think we could talk for hours on this, and obviously on
Please don't.
YouTube and stuff. There are loads of great things about storytelling and that kind of thing. I think a few things. Obviously, strong characters within your story. So whether that's like us and we have a production, we have an actor who's this hero character that represents your potential customer and stuff. That's one end of the scale. The other end of the scale is, oh, we haven't created any content before. No one knows about our business.
We're the characters.
Who are going to be the characters within our business to get out to the outside world, and how can we show their personality and their skills? So that's one thing. I also think in storytelling, it's that, what we were talking about before, that change of emotion and change of feeling throughout the story. And that could be as simple as, we had this challenge and it was hard. And then we did this and we did this
Yeah.
great thing for our clients. That's the kind of thing.
The
And-
ups and downs make a good story, don't they? If it was all just, yeah, we did really well, and then we got even better and
Exactly.
we grew, whereas it's,
Yeah, and
it was
again,
rubbish, it was good. That
There's so much stuff you can learn on this, but a narrative arc is something that is important in storytelling. Again, if you're interested in this, look it up and you can read lots about it and find out stuff. But it's that thing of there's different levels throughout the story and it kind of goes like a roller coaster. So you set it up and there's rising action and then you have this climax in a story and then
it all goes wrong.
it goes back down and then there's a resolution and stuff like that. And that's really interesting. And again, this is going into more detail and more of the kind of creative tools to tell a good story. But I think the thing that makes businesses go wrong with storytelling and their content and their marketing is they just look and go, I've got to do an Instagram story. What are my competition doing? What's
Posting a picture of their dinner.
yeah, what's the other engineering company down the road posting? I'll do that.
Yeah.
Whereas, like we always say with our business and how we do things, set your bar high outside of your business, outside of your industry. You know, you should be looking at things like a narrative arc because that's what they do in feature films. So I think, you know,
How could we-
whose Instagram story is going to be best and most engaging? The people that have thought about this stuff and are like, how are good stories told in films, in books, in comedies and in dramas? Or the guy that's like, oh, my competitor posted a picture of his dinner, so I'll do it.
Yeah.
You know, which business is going to thrive and which isn't.
Yeah.
Sorry. Storytelling rent.
No, that was really good.
Peace out.
A-Town Down.
What song was that?
Can't remember.
Cool.
So to summarise, I think it's important that you don't overthink storytelling. It's not about getting on camera and opening a book and reading it. There's lots of things going on in your business, you know, micro piece of content you can create very easily with things like Instagram stories, and start there. What else?
I think that's a good point. Like we've just at the end of that conversation been going into like aspects of storytelling that will seem completely alien to most business owners and stuff. But in reality, it can be much easier than you think. Like we said, storytelling can be done in a case study. Storytelling can be done in 2 sentences about your business.
In a photo and some copy.
And then there's the other end. Once you start doing that stuff, or if you're already doing that stuff, how can you improve storytelling within your business? And setting the bar high, what are other people doing that are storytellers, and let's try and emulate some of that and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's easy and it's hard.
Do it now.
Right, tell us a story, Dan.
That put me on the spot a bit.
See, Dan,
I've got loads of stories. What do you want to hear about?
maybe we'll save the brilliant stories for the next episode.
Oh,
of
yeah,
the
because we're talking about
podcast.
something really interesting
Yeah,
next.
yeah, save those brilliant stories, Dan.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see you in the next episodes of the Business Anchors podcast, where Dan will definitely be telling brilliant stories. So make sure you listen. Thanks,
then.
guys. See you next week.